Picture this. It's the year 1503 in the Vatican. You see something that makes your blood run cold. The Pope himself, Alexander VI, is embracing what appears to be a beautiful young woman draped in silk and jewels. But whispers follow in their wake, because everyone knows the horrifying truth. That woman beside the most powerful man in the world was once his innocent daughter. And what he did to her represents one of the most disturbing acts of psychological and physical abuse in recorded history. You're standing in the Sistine Chapel at midnight, candles flickering around you, and you can't comprehend what you're witnessing. Pope Alexander VI, wearing his golden crown and holy vestments, is kissing his 22-year-old daughter. But this isn't how a father kisses his child. Your hands shake as you hear him whisper, "My holy wife," to the young woman. That woman is Lucrezia Borgia, his daughter, his lover, and now his officially proclaimed saint. Before diving into these forgotten stories, if you enjoy learning about history's hidden truths, consider hitting that like button. Please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. It's incredible that we're exploring these dark tales together from different parts of the world. Here's the shocking truth. When Lucrezia was born in 1476, the Pope wasn't Pope yet. He was just the ambitious Cardinal Rodrigo Borgia. But the moment he first saw the baby, something broke inside him. Documents in the Vatican archives clearly show this. Rodrigo would spend hours by the cradle, talking to the infant. One priest recorded, "Cardinal Borgia shows abnormal interest in the little one, as if he sees her as specially created for himself." When Lucrezia turned 12, her father's behavior became impossible to hide. He separated her from other children, arranged private lessons, never left her side. By the time she understood what was happening at age 15, it was too late. When Rodrigo Borgia was elected Pope in 1492, he became the most powerful man on earth, and the first place he used this power was his own home. Renaissance historian Francesco Guicciardini wrote, "The new Pope's devotion to his daughter had now exceeded all boundaries. While he never separated from her, explaining this as paternal love became increasingly difficult." The Pope built special apartments for 16-year-old Lucrezia in the Vatican. But these apartments were connected to the papal quarters by secret passages. No guard was informed of these passages' existence. During this time, Lucrezia's character began to change. The once cheerful child gradually became withdrawn and fearful. In 1493, the Pope married his daughter to Giovanni Sforza. From the outside, it appeared to be a political marriage, but the reality was much darker. On their wedding night, Giovanni encountered something he would never forget. When he tried to touch his young wife, she had a hysterical episode. "No, this is a sin. I cannot betray the Pope." Giovanni's confusion was understandable. His wife acted as if being intimate with him was a terrible betrayal. Worse still, throughout the night she murmured another name, not Giovanni's. During their first year of marriage, Giovanni was horrified. Lucrezia refused to establish normal marital relations with him and regularly held private meetings with her father. She returned from these meetings even more broken. In 1496, Giovanni courageously complained to the Pope about the situation. The Pope's response was chillingly cold. "Perhaps you are not worthy of my daughter's value." A week later, Giovanni died mysteriously. The official cause was sudden illness, but the symptoms suggested poisoning. After Giovanni's death, Lucrezia completely changed. She no longer resisted. She had become her father's perfect puppet. In 1498, her second marriage was arranged with Alfonso d'Aragona. This marriage was also short-lived. Alfonso was accidentally killed in 1500. After losing both husbands, Lucrezia now belonged completely to her father, and the Pope no longer felt the need to hide. Renaissance historian Paolo Giovio recorded, "The Pope's behavior toward his daughter has now reached scandalous proportions. He calls her my holy creation and considers kissing her in public normal." In 1503, the Pope made his shocking decision. He would declare Lucrezia a saint. This created an earthquake effect in the Christian world. Making a living person a saint, especially one with such a controversial past, was unprecedented. But the Pope's logic was diabolically clever. By declaring his daughter holy, he was also sanctifying his relationship with her. The canonization ceremony took place on Christmas 1503. Lucrezia, dressed in white, was blessed by the Pope. That night, for the first time, the Pope and his saint slept in the same bed. Martin Luther would later use this event as justification for the Protestant Reformation. In Rome, the devil ascended the throne and made his own daughter his goddess. What made Pope Alexander VI's crime so calculated wasn't just the physical abuse, but the psychological conditioning that accompanied it. Vatican records reveal a systematic program of isolation and indoctrination that modern psychologists would recognize as textbook grooming behavior. From early childhood, Lucrezia was told she was special, chosen by God, and different from other children. The Pope commissioned private tutors who taught her not just languages and arts, but also that her relationship with her father was blessed and holy. Dr. Johannes Burchard, the Pope's personal physician, left behind secret notes describing the palace atmosphere. His Holiness has created an environment where the natural order is inverted. The daughter is treated as wife, sin is called virtue, and sacred bonds are used to justify the most profane acts. The psychological manipulation was sophisticated. Lucrezia was surrounded by servants and courtiers who had been carefully selected for their willingness to participate in the fiction. Anyone who showed discomfort or questioned the arrangement was immediately dismissed or, in some cases, disappeared entirely. This created a bubble of false reality where Lucrezia's abuse was not only normalized but celebrated. She grew up believing that her suffering was actually a form of divine privilege, that her father's attention was proof of her special status in God's eyes. Word of the Pope's relationship with his daughter began to spread beyond Vatican walls, creating diplomatic crises across Europe. Foreign ambassadors wrote horrified reports to their home countries, describing scenes that defied Christian morality. The French ambassador, Cardinal d'Amboise, sent this dispatch to King Louis VII. "Your Majesty, what I have witnessed in Rome surpasses the most depraved tales of ancient paganism. The Vicar of Christ has made his daughter his concubine and calls this union blessed." Similar reports came from Spanish, German, and English diplomatic corps. The scandal became so widespread that several European monarchs threatened to break communion with Rome unless the situation was addressed. But Pope Alexander VI's response to international pressure revealed the depth of his corruption. Rather than showing shame or attempting reform, he became more defiant. He began appearing publicly with Lucrezia at his side, introducing her not as his daughter, but as his spiritual partner and divine consort. This brazen display shocked even the cynical Roman aristocracy, who were accustomed to papal corruption but had never seen anything quite so blatant. The process of Lucrezia's canonization was itself a mockery of Christian tradition. Normally, sainthood required extensive investigation, proof of miracles, and most importantly, death. Saints were meant to be models of virtue whose lives could inspire others. Pope Alexander VI bypassed all these requirements through papal decree. He commissioned artists to create paintings showing Lucrezia with a halo surrounded by angels. These images were distributed throughout Rome and beyond, creating a visual narrative of her supposed holiness. The Pope also ordered the construction of a special shrine within the Vatican where pilgrims could come to venerate the living saint. This shrine contained relics of Lucrezia's clothing, locks of her hair, and other personal items that were treated as holy objects. Most disturbing of all, the Pope began celebrating a special Mass in Lucrezia's honor, praising her purity, devotion, and sacrifice. The irony was lost on no one. The very qualities being celebrated were the ones her father had systematically destroyed. Contemporary witnesses described these ceremonies as deeply unsettling. Cardinal Giuliano della Rovere, later Pope Julius II, wrote, "I have witnessed the sacred liturgy perverted to serve the most unholy purposes. What we see is not the elevation of a saint, but the deification of sin itself." Modern psychological analysis of the relationship between Pope Alexander VI and Lucrezia reveals classic patterns of narcissistic abuse combined with religious manipulation. The Pope didn't just want physical control over his daughter, he wanted complete ownership of her identity and soul. By declaring her a saint, he achieved the ultimate form of control. He made her believe that serving his desires was actually serving God. This psychological conditioning was so complete that Lucrezia began to experience genuine religious ecstasy during their encounters, convinced that she was participating in sacred mystery. Dr. Maria Santos, a modern expert on religious abuse, explains, "What we see in the Borgia case is the weaponization of religious authority to justify incest. By positioning himself as God's representative and his daughter as his holy bride, Alexander VI created a closed system where abuse became worship." The Pope also used confession as a tool of control. As both Lucrezia's father and her spiritual authority, he controlled not only her body but also her conscience. He heard her confessions and granted her absolution for the very sins he forced her to commit, creating a circular system of abuse and forgiveness that left her completely dependent on him. Perhaps most damaging to the Catholic Church's reputation was the extent to which Vatican officials participated in or ignored the Pope's crimes. Cardinals, bishops, and other high-ranking clergy who should have been moral leaders instead became enablers and co-conspirators. Some participated actively in the deception, helping to spread the fiction of Lucrezia's sainthood and defending the Pope's actions in public. Others remained silent, choosing career advancement over moral responsibility. Cardinal Giovanni de' Medici, later Pope Leo X, left behind private letters expressing his horror at the situation, but also his fear of speaking out. What transpires in the papal apartments is an abomination before God, yet to speak against it would mean excommunication or worse. We have become prisoners of our own silence. This institutional complicity meant that Lucrezia had nowhere to turn for help. The very people who should have protected her, bishops, confessors, church officials, were either actively participating in her abuse or too cowardly to intervene. The psychological impact on Lucrezia was devastating. She learned that the entire religious system she had been taught to trust and obey was corrupt, that there was no authority higher than her father's will, and that her suffering was not just tolerated but celebrated by those who claimed to serve God. Not everyone in Rome accepted the Pope's perversion of Christian doctrine. A secret network of priests, monks, and lay believers began documenting the crimes and working to preserve evidence for future generations. Brother Savonarola, before his execution, preached against the corruption. "Babylon has come to Rome. The shepherd devours his own flock, and what is holy is made profane." These brave individuals risked their lives to create a historical record that would survive the Pope's attempts to control the narrative. They copied documents, preserved witness testimonies, and created coded records that would later help historians understand the full extent of the scandal. Many paid the ultimate price for their courage. At least 12 priests who spoke out against the Pope's relationship with his daughter were found dead under suspicious circumstances. Their martyrdom served as a warning to others who might consider resistance. Yet their sacrifice was not in vain. The documents they preserved provide crucial evidence for modern historians and serve as testament to the fact that even in the darkest times, some people refuse to remain silent in the face of evil. As Pope Alexander VI aged, his grip on reality began to slip. The psychological strain of maintaining his elaborate fiction while suppressing his conscience took its toll. Palace staff reported increasingly erratic behavior, violent mood swings, and paranoid episodes. The Pope became obsessed with the idea that God was going to punish him for his sins. He began having nightmares where Lucrezia appeared as an avenging angel, condemning him to hell. These dreams were so vivid that he would wake screaming and refuse to be alone with his daughter for days at a time. In his final weeks, the Pope's mental state deteriorated rapidly. He began speaking to invisible accusers, defending his actions to phantoms only he could see. Dr. Burchard recorded his final confession. His Holiness weeps constantly, calling upon Christ to forgive him for destroying innocence in the name of love. He speaks of Lucrezia as both his greatest joy and his damnation. When death finally came on August 18, 1503, witnesses reported that the Pope's last word was Lucrezia, spoken not with love, but with the terror of a man who finally understood the magnitude of his crimes. Pope Alexander VI's death should have meant freedom for Lucrezia, but the damage was too complete. 27 years of systematic abuse had left her unable to function as an independent human being. The new pope, Julius II, immediately revoked Lucrezia's sainthood and banished her from the Vatican. But rather than experiencing relief, she suffered a complete psychological breakdown. The only identity she had ever known, as her father's holy bride, had been stripped away, leaving nothing behind. Her marriage to Alfonso d'Este in 1505 was arranged as a way to distance the new papacy from the previous scandal. But Lucrezia was incapable of normal relationships. She would spend hours staring at portraits of her father, speaking to them as if he were present. The Duke of Ferrara's court physician, Dr. Antonio Benevieni, documented her condition. The Duchess suffers from melancholia so profound that she often cannot recognize reality. She believes her father watches her from beyond death and becomes agitated when anyone suggests otherwise. Lucrezia's final years were marked by increasing mental instability, religious mania, and attempts at self-harm. She died in 1519 during childbirth complications, but many historians believe she welcomed death as the only escape from her psychological prison. Following Lucrezia's death, the Vatican launched one of history's most comprehensive cover-up operations. Pope Leo X ordered a systematic review of all records from Alexander VI's papacy, with instructions to destroy or alter any documents that contained inappropriate material. Entire sections of the Vatican secret archives were sealed, labelled as too sensitive for historical inquiry. Artists were commissioned to paint over existing frescoes that depicted Lucrezia, replacing her image with generic saints. Her personal belongings were burned, and servants who had witnessed the abuse were paid substantial sums to leave Rome and never speak of what they had seen. The official Vatican history of the period makes no mention of Lucrezia's canonization or her relationship with her father. Instead, it portrays her simply as a devoted daughter who served the Church with distinction. This institutional denial has persisted for over 500 years. Even today, the Vatican maintains that allegations against Pope Alexander VI are unsubstantiated rumors spread by Protestant enemies of the Church. The story of Pope Alexander VI and Lucrezia Borgia isn't just ancient history. It's a case study in how institutional power can be used to normalize and perpetuate abuse. The same dynamics we see in their relationship continue to appear in various forms today. Religious leaders who abuse their authority, family members who exploit their power over children, and institutions that protect predators rather than victims, all of these modern problems echo the patterns established in Renaissance Rome. Dr. Patricia Williams, who studies institutional abuse, notes, "The Borgia case shows us how perpetrators use ideology, whether religious, political, or familial, to justify their crimes. By convincing victims that abuse is actually love, service, or divine will, they create psychological prisons that are extremely difficult to escape." The psychological techniques used by Pope Alexander VI, isolation, indoctrination, religious manipulation, and the creation of alternate reality, are still employed by abusers today. Understanding these patterns can help us recognize and prevent similar crimes in our own time. One of the most disturbing aspects of Lucrezia's story is the question of her own complicity in the later stages of the abuse. As she aged, did she become an active participant in maintaining the fiction of their holy relationship? Or was she always purely a victim of circumstances beyond her control? Historical evidence suggests a complex reality. Lucrezia certainly suffered genuine trauma and never had the opportunity to develop normal relationship patterns. But she also wielded considerable influence within the Vatican and used her position to advance her family's interests. Some historians argue that she became complicit in order to survive, adopting a Stockholm Syndrome-like attachment to her abuser. Others suggest that by adulthood, she had internalized the abuse so completely that she genuinely believed in the righteousness of her father's actions. This ambiguity doesn't diminish the horror of her childhood trauma or excuse the Pope's crimes. Rather, it illustrates how abuse can distort victims' perception of reality so completely that the line between victim and participant becomes blurred. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of this entire story is that it represents the ultimate betrayal of trust. Pope Alexander VI held two positions that should have made Lucrezia safe. He was her father, and he was God's representative on earth. As her father, he should have protected her innocence and guided her toward healthy relationships. As the Pope, he should have been a moral example and spiritual guide. Instead, he used both roles to justify the most profound form of abuse. This double betrayal created psychological wounds that could never heal. Lucrezia could never trust paternal authority because her father had violated her. She could never trust religious authority because the Pope had corrupted sacred teachings. She could never trust her own judgment because she had been conditioned from birth to accept abuse as love. The ripple effects of this betrayal extended far beyond one family. The scandal contributed to the Protestant Reformation, permanently damaged the Catholic Church's moral authority, and provided ammunition for critics of institutional religion that continues to this day. The story of Pope Alexander VI and Lucrezia Borgia serves as one of history's darkest warnings about the corruption of absolute power. It shows us how even the most sacred institutions can become vehicles for unspeakable evil when they are controlled by individuals who place their own desires above all moral considerations. But perhaps more importantly, it reminds us of the human cost of institutional failure. Behind the political intrigue and religious scandal lies the simple tragedy of a child whose innocence was systematically destroyed by the very people who should have protected her. Lucrezia Borgia was not just a historical figure. She was a real person who suffered real trauma. Her story deserves to be remembered not as a curiosity or scandal, but as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and a warning about the dangers of unchecked power. Today, as we continue to uncover institutional abuse in various forms, from religious organizations to sports programs to entertainment industries, Lucrezia's story remains painfully relevant. It reminds us that predators often hide behind positions of authority and trust, and that institutions will sometimes protect abusers rather than victims. The question that haunts us across 5 centuries remains: was Lucrezia truly a victim throughout her entire life, or did she eventually choose to embrace the power that came with being her father's holy bride? Your answer to this question may reveal something profound about how you understand the relationship between power, love, and survival. The shadows of the Vatican still echo with her story, and somewhere in our own gleaming institutions, the same ancient horrors wear new faces while the essential evil remains unchanged. We are them, they are us. The only difference is time, and time has never been a barrier to human cruelty, only an excuse for forgetting it.